So thank you so much for being here tonight. This is our regular monthly meeting, and we're excited to welcome Carol Syracuse. She's a local watercolorist and a signature member of the Niagara Frontier Watercolor Society. She's an exhibiting member of the Buffalo Society of Artists and the Western New York Artists Group. She's a retired architect and an active docent at the Birchfield Penny Art Center. So thank you so much for being here tonight, Carol, and we're really excited to hear what you share with us.
Well, thank you. It's a real pleasure. Actually, I'm no longer an active docent at the Birchfield Penny. I was one of the first docent class when they opened the new building, and that was really exciting. But I discovered within about a year that if I wasn't willing to study, that I probably shouldn't be telling people about things, because I ended up doing what I often do, and that is just making up facts. Not a good idea.
I'm sorry. I apologize for that.
Oh, that's all right. No, that's fine. It was a great experience. I was still working at the time. I came to Buffalo in 2001 to become an officer at Canon Design. I had had my own office for 20 years down in Chautauqua County, and my expertise primarily was in public schools, and it was when the Buffalo public, or all the school districts in the state, were getting an extra 10% of state aid, and the people who ran the education practice at Canon wanted someone who knew how to do the calculations to maximize school districts' money that they got. So they came after me, and I was a widow, and I actually met Tom Palamuso, who I married a year later, and came up to Buffalo, moved in with him, and the rest is history. It was great. Anyway, what I'm gonna do tonight is share a PowerPoint that I hate PowerPoints. Back to my architecture days, I hate PowerPoints. But I think visually it's an easy way to show some of the work that I've done. So I'm going to share the screen. And I'm going to start with a very non-architectural and also non-watercolor image from 1971. I had just finished Princeton, got a Master of Architecture from Princeton. I was very pregnant. In fact, at one of the design studio days, I walked in and they had cut a big half circle out of my drafting board. Fortunately, it was an old drafting board that they'd substituted for the real one, and I almost had a heart attack because I had to do a thesis. And we lived on a little farm in New Jersey, and there's my daughter Cindy, who's going to be 50 this summer, and those are our goats. It was a good time. I was very much the hippie in those days. And here I am in 2020, April 26th, in fact, looking at myself in the mirror with my brand new mask. Not really, had no idea what was really going to be happening, but that's my sketching. Going back to when I lived in Fredonia, I had an office in Dunkirk, Fredonia, and that's what I looked like back in those days. I had 12 employees, and I worked really hard. I worked 60 to 70 hours a week with 2 little girls by myself, and it was a tough time, but it was well worth it. When I moved up to Buffalo, I met in 2002 because my daughter was the curator of the gallery at the Buffalo Art Studios, and another woman's daughter was the head of development. I met Sally Trainer. And Sally probably was the most critically important person in my development as an artist. I had been an art major in college, but printmaking and drawing primarily. And then I went to architecture school, and I never really did any drawing. In fact, I didn't do any any rendering at all. I did a lot of freehand design, but I didn't do any rendering. It was Sally who introduced me to watercolor. Now, my mom had been a watercolor painter, was a watercolor painter. She died in 2010, but she was a really, I always thought it was boring. She did a lot of house portraits. And I thought, gee, I don't want to do watercolor. It's just, it's a boring medium. But then Sally introduced me to the wonderful things that can happen in watercolor. The one on the left is the first thing that I did as part of the History Museum's Paint the Town, which used to be a really wonderful event. I don't know if any of you had an opportunity to be there. They had, you go in on a Saturday morning, get a box breakfast, box lunch, and you have a day to do a drawing or a painting or a sculpture or whatever, get it framed, you bring it back, and it's auctioned off. So this one of City Hall, I did that way, which was amazing that I could get it done. But there's no ink here. I started adding ink later, and it became really my signature way of doing things in the early, like in the first half of the 2000s. This was 2009. It's the History Museum. This was done for Paint the Town also. And one of the things, people who look at this really like all the lines and stuff in the sky. And I have to admit that the only reason that there are lines in the sky was because I was so disappointed with the wash that I'd tried to do. So the way that I got around the fact that I felt I had failed on the sky. But you can do all kinds of things with failure if you use ink. So I kept doing a lot of pen and ink and watercolor, and never did it for anybody other than me or the Historical Society. And over the years, people started to take note, and that was a surprise to me because it was just because I wanted to do it. I didn't do it to sell. In 2011, I had a show at what was called the Stuyvesant Gallery on Elmwood Avenue. I don't know if you remember it. They had a wonderful shop there, and one end of the store was a gallery. And that was the first show that I ever had. They did all the framing for me, or I wouldn't have been able to do it. And it was a real plus. This is the Guarantee Building. You can probably tell that I love detail. I love detail. And interestingly, I don't know if you're aware, but the Niagara Frontier Watercolor Society has 2 workshops a year. And they bring in all these wonderful artists. And my main goal in taking those workshops was to try to loosen up. And then I discovered, through time that my style was not to loosen up, that in fact, what people loved was the detail and the color and the line, the way they worked together. And at some point in the last 20 years, I must have realized that it was okay to do what I wanted to do, that I didn't have to do things that other people wanted. This was 2006. It's the casino, a little looser, probably after a loose workshop. But again, it's pen and ink and watercolor. People ask me, did you do rendering? Did you do watercolor paintings when you were working as an architect? And as I said, I never really did that at all. I gave it to other people to do the renderings. I never thought that I had that as a capability until I got close to retirement. This is inside the waterworks in Buffalo. I love color and I love line. And I think my composition, whatever skills I have in composition, come from an innate artistic sense. My grandmother and my aunt and my mother are all working artists. So it was around me all the time. And my grandmother lived with us, my mother's mother, and I would come home from school every night and she'd have an art project for me. So I'd go up into her room and she had a big desk and we'd do a drawing or a painting or some kind of cut thing. She had all kinds of different materials for me to work with. I never went to an art school until I went to college, but I felt like I learned a lot. I've had a couple of maybe three, now probably 4 or 5 shows since the one at the Stuyvesant Gallery. This was fun. This was part of one that I put together as the curator for Studio Heart. It was called Buffalo: A Work in Progress. And it was Sarah Zach, who you all guys all must know. She's from East Aurora. And and Chris, what was Chris Hawley, who's actually a city planner. And he's a photographer, she's an oil painter, and I was a watercolorist. And we did all kinds of, they're all really small. This is 8 inches square of drawings and paintings and photographs of around Buffalo. And it was a very successful show. It was lots of fun. Remember, it opened in a snowstorm in January, and we were all really afraid. It was the first Friday of the month in right after New Year's, that nobody was going to show up. And we had a huge crowd, and we sold out. It was great. It was really wonderful. This is, I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's let's see, what do they call this area? I'm not going to be able to remember it, but I remember sitting and drawing it. It was fun. Okay, this is me and Tom. I was very lucky to meet Tom. We met racing sailboats on Lake Erie. I was on a crew that was from Chautauqua County, and he was on a crew of his friends from Buffalo. And we were in the same fleet, so we kept passing in the night. And his boat had these 3 white-haired, bearded guys who looked really relaxed. And I happened to know one of them, and I asked him and I asked this friend of mine, I said, "Are any of you guys single?" And he said, "Well, Tom is, but his wife died just a couple years ago, and he's totally devoted. He's not." I said, "I don't want to get married. I just want to get to know somebody and have somebody to go out for dinner with once in a while." Well, that was August of 2000, and I moved in February of 2001. I work very quickly when I see something that I want. Oh, I'm glad to hear a laugh. But we turned out to be wonderful for each other. I'm going to go back one. This is the first trip that we took together, or one of the first trips. And you can see that I have a sketchbook in my hand. Let me point this way. It's, I hadn't done any sketching. This was 2006, I think. I hadn't done any of the urban sketching kinds of things before this point. And I can remember, this is the drawing that I did that day. It was, we stayed in this wonderful little stone house in this town in the south of France. And when I did that, I still have it. And I thought, it's 2000, the date, 2006. I like doing this. This is fun. And all Tom needed to hear was, she likes doing this. She likes it. It's fun. And he ended up just buying every sketchbook and every pen and every colored pencil that he could find over the years. And here, this is what I had in my first. I like to travel very light. We each take one suitcase apiece, one small carry-on, and I kept everything in my purse. All this stuff went into my purse, so that when this is a Moleskin Sketchbook, which is a really nice watercolor sketchbook. This thing is called Easy Hands. It's a great thing. It's a band that fits around the sketchbook, and these are watercolor pens or watercolor brushes that actually have water in them, and all the pens and watercolor pencils, and I always took paper with me. So I could go anywhere with just my purse and have everything that I needed in order to, hi Andrea, everything I needed in order to sketch on when I was traveling. And one of the things that we discovered in the first trip that we took together, which was 2004, when we went to Italy, was that I'm a type A personality and Tom is not. He's Italian, and he could sit and drink espresso and enjoy the people passing by for an hour. And I would sit down and the espresso would be gone in 5 minutes, and I'd be ready to get up and move along. Well, the only thing that kept us together at that point was the next time when I started going and sketching. sketching at the coffee break, so that I even let my espresso get cold because I had so much fun sketching. And these are some sketches that I did in a trip that we took in 2010 to, this was in Cinque Terre, but these are very rough, and they actually, they're probably better than a lot of the stuff that I do now. Let me go back, because they're very, very loose. You can see I use brown and black. Enjoy it a lot. Um, we've traveled every year until COVID messed up and we couldn't go to England last year. But we've been to Paris twice. One time we stayed for a whole month. This was in the first trip to Paris. You can see me sketching there. Here I am in our second trip to Paris, very much involved in a sketch. Actually, I was doing a plein air drawing at that point. And then back in the United States, I did a painting of me painting, and this was in a show at Betty's. What did I call that? It was some kind of a travel show, a solo show. It was fun to do. Um, I do love watercolor. You can see that I love watercolor. There's so much that you can do with it, and I love the color. And it's so different today than it used to be when my mother was doing it, when the colors are really bland. I mean, this is a very limited palette, and yet I've got all kinds of color in it. We've traveled to Argentina and Turkey and Croatia, and I think this is actually Croatia, and here's Italy. This is a typical page from my Moleskin Sketchbook. I keep track day to day. I write what we've been doing, not long, just a short description of where we've been. I collect pieces from restaurants and coffee shops and stores and wherever we've been, art galleries. You can see we do a lot of gelato. There's the gelateria. Um, and pizza. No, that's piazza. But this is just a little harbor on Lake Como. This, I don't know where this came from, but what a cool image is that. And this one also. I think this was the logo for one of the espresso coffee makers in Italy. And this again this is one page of a Moleskin sketchbook, and I just did this little sketch as we were sitting there having our coffee. The other place that we go every year, and we couldn't go this past year, is to Key West. And again, it's a Moleskin sketchbook page. I love sea grapes. I just love them. And I also, now this is Hawaii. We came back from Vietnam and wanted to cut the trip a little bit. Of course, it wasn't exactly in half. Mostly it was an excuse to go to Hawaii for a week. But we stayed in the Pili Bay in Maui, and what a wonderful place. This is from Vietnam, and I remember this day so well. We were in Hanoi, and it was so hot and humid. We were just dying. So we sat down at a table, and it was out in front of a restaurant, and the man came out, and they had pineapple juice. So I asked for pineapple juice, and in Vietnam, I became a pineapple juice addict. It was so delicious, and it just hit the spot. But the thing about this location, which most interested me, were these unbelievable tangles of this tangle here is how all the wires going into a house. This is a simplification of what we actually saw. I have never seen such electricity. It's amazing. What an interesting place. We were in Vietnam for 3 weeks. It was Tom had been in Vietnam in the Vietnamese War. We went back to where he was stationed and found the land where he had been an MP, where he worked as an MP. and the people were all wonderful. There was a lot of talking about my father died in Vietnam, or my father was permanently disabled in Vietnam during the Vietnamese War. My father was in the Viet Cong, and yet they shook hands and embraced us, and it was just a phenomenal trip. I recommend it. Although I just heard that they had a big COVID. They're having a COVID outbreak, so. This is from one of the hotels or one of the restaurants in Saigon, which is Ho Chi Minh City now. But Tom remembers this kind of truck when he was there. It's a very interesting. It was right in the restaurant, and I developed a whole bunch of different palettes. Finally, I decided that I needed more than just watercolor pencils. This is a wonderful little palette. I got this in Paris. I went into what's the name of the place? Here, I'm going to forget. It's a famous art supply store that actually made a lot of the pigments for Van Gogh and Cezanne. And I asked them for a small metal palette. I wanted a small metal palette, and the woman who worked there, Sennelier is the name of the place. Woman who worked there brought out a whole bunch of little metal palettes there, and this one's about 3 inches long, and it's the one I like the best. And I was so excited about getting a French palette, and it turns out it was made in England. It was Daily Rauner. Daily Rauner, I think is the name of the company. Anyway, it's served me well. I still use it. I also really like a fountain pen even more than the Pigma Micron and other kinds of pens. This is a Lamy fountain pen, which I use still. And this brush is cool. This actually comes apart, and the metal cap covers the very nice. It's a Escoda Barocca. And this is the best water container that you can find anywhere, and it's a gelato cup. So you can, this gives you an idea of what a page looks like. Here's what I wrote about from that day and the things that I collected, and a sketch from the time. This was in Istria, up in northern Italy. Very nice place. Not Istria, sorry. Oh dear, getting old. This is a close-up of that. They had it's not Siena where they have a wonderful pony race. It's another place that has the same kind of Assisi. That doesn't matter. Anyway, it's northern Italy, and this is all done. You can actually see the watercolor pencil with the way that looks, even after you've added water to it. I used both watercolor pencil here and water, and just plain watercolor. This is all plain watercolor up in here. One of my favorite groups of artists are Chinese and Japanese. And when we were in Vietnam, we went to Halong Bay, and I was fascinated by the landscape, which reminded me so much of all the wonderful Chinese paintings, the brush paintings that I'd seen. So this is a little different because it's me, and I'm not Chinese, but I used a graphite watercolor pencil for the grays. It's actually graphite, but when you add water to it, it makes a really nice shade if you want it, or really dark. And I also use pen and ink, and it's again in a simple moleskin pad. I'm still in my purse with all this stuff. And the only thing that's in this group of things that I don't take with me is a color wheel. I just put that on because I thought it looked cool. But I use both watercolor pencils in this really neat container, which is called, I have it right here, Neocrits. They make all different sizes. It zips up to protect the watercolor pencils. And then when you open it up, it's actually sturdy enough to stand up. And these are watercolor crayons, and they're really interesting. They do a different thing than watercolor pencils, but they're fun to use both of them together. Here I am on Lake Como, probably our favorite place in the world. Um, just, I don't know if you guys have ever been to Lake Como, but if I could live someplace else, I would live in Purana on Lake Como. It's a small town away from a lot of the tourists, although there are tourists there now more than there used to be. Just such a comforting place. And this is the view that you get when you have a place that's not right on in the main drag. I loved looking back across this. I did it. This I don't know that I could ever do this again. I was so clever when I did this with the double exposure of the photograph and the drawings that I did. And this is a little bit out of focus, but this is a watercolor and ink drawing from the vista that I had when I was sitting at that table that I showed you. Bright colors. I love bright colors. My teacher, Sally, I still take watercolor classes from Sally Trainer. And she said she has accused me of painting with a sledgehammer. That's okay because we're best friends. This is one of the plein air paintings that I did last time we were in Verona. I call it Purana Beach. There is no beach in Purana. And the water is in Lake Como. It's because it's so deep, so fast. It's like just short of ice. It is so cold. It's a gorgeous place. You don't go there if you want to go swimming. Another part of Italy that we're very fond of is Bologna, and this is a painting that I did plein air when I was sitting in this square. Bologna is fascinating. It's a big university. It's the oldest university town in Europe, and lots of students, lots of wonderful old buildings, lots of wonderful colonnades like this one over here. So I did a painting, and I spent all morning because Tom was doing what he loves. He was in a cooking class, learning how to make bolognese sauce. Ragu he calls it. So he was doing that, I was doing this, and there was a German couple who stood behind me the whole time. 5 hours. They were very nice, and they took a whole bunch of pictures, which was really nice. This still hangs in my back hall. Now, people ask me, from the sketches that you do on your travels, do you come back and do paintings? And that's actually not the way I work generally, but occasionally an image will be so compelling. And I actually didn't do a sketch of this, but I have a lot of photographs from the hotel that we stayed at in Ho Chi Minh City, looking out at the contrast between the old and the new architecture. And mostly it was about light for me, just this incredible light coming down and bleaching out so much and then going into shadow. This painting actually, there's no ink in this one. This has won some prizes, and I was really happy and honored to get some of the prizes that I've won with that. It was actually accepted into a national show, which is, the only national show I've ever tried to get into is the one in the Adirondacks, and I've gotten into it 4 times now. Here's a wonderful photograph of the Mekong Delta. It's actually a restaurant that we went to. This is the sketch that I did of that photograph when I was sitting there waiting for dinner. And then I was pretty much in love with this. I would have to say, of all the images that I've spent time with from our trips, this one is probably my favorite. And what I did was I made a large painting of it when I got back home. So this is the exception to that do you actually do paintings from your sketches? In this case, I did. You can see that this one had ink in it. It's done very quickly. This one actually done quickly too, but doesn't have any ink. It's all watercolor. And my only problem with both of these is that it appears that there are two suns. But I like to just say that, no, this is just a reflection over here. But in fact, I probably could improve upon that, but I'm not going to do anything. When I'm home, one of my disappointments in myself is that I don't sketch when I'm home very often. This was done sitting at my kitchen table looking out the back window at the houses, and that's a carriage house for one of the beautiful homes on Lincoln Parkway, and that's our garage with the wall that Tom built to cover the earth boxes, which have a vegetable garden in them every summer, on the roof of our garage. It's the only place in our backyard that has a lot of sun, so we plant vegetables there. People thought that was just the greatest thing. It's been in national magazines, and there was even a chapter in a book on vegetable gardens. I think this is in Seattle when we were visiting Tom's kid. Here's a sketch that I did when I was teaching like a 3-hour workshop at the Birchfield Penny. It's of a view that I photographed from the City of Light or the City of Night grain silos.
Hi.
And this is the painting that I did. Look at the difference between that.
Wow.
I had a teacher once, one of the workshops I took, he said, if you could just paint the way you sketch. He liked the freedom that I had in sketching. But I'm happy with this painting. Again, it's pen and ink with watercolor. It's a very popular image. A lot of people have bought prints of it. And I think I did it. I think it's a good job. But, I don't know if you guys as artists and craftsmen have something that you do really well, like this. We'll use this as an example. And yet you don't really want to do that all the time. You want to do stuff that challenges you. And then there are people who say, why don't you do more buildings? There's so many wonderful buildings around. Once you're done with Buffalo, you could go out to East Aurora and do all the Roycroft buildings and stuff. And I know they're right, except I still want to challenge myself. This is a sketch that I did. I started to get interested in doing sketches on colored paper. And this is beige. It's a Bidwell Park concert. Done with watercolor, pencil, and pen in place. It took me a couple hours just while I was watching the concert, listening to the concert. I think the success of these is the attitudes of some of these people that I watched. And I'm not really a people drawer, so I was pleased with that. Last fall, when COVID was just starting to ease, and the Arts Group Gallery on the corner of Linwood and North had the first show that they had was three of us. We called it 20 Minutes from Everywhere. And it was a bunch of plein air and studio sketches and paintings of places in Buffalo. And all three of these were in that show. I think this one sold and that one sold. I've still got this one. It was a very successful show. It was me and Karen Fagan and Kath Schifano. We had 3 different kinds of media. This is one that I did of the Heath House, which is the Frank Lloyd Wright house, which is right around the corner from where I live. And the light on it early in the morning when I walk my dog is just stunning. There is not a sunny morning that disappoints with that house. One of the Niagara Frontier plein air painters things that I did was this Frank Lloyd Wright house. And I have to say, as a matter of critique, that it's much too tight. I was very, very interested in all the detail and how the building was put together, and I just got carried away. This one over here is Psychiatric Center It's a pen and ink drawing. I thought when I did it plein air that I remember thinking I'm going to take it back to my studio and add watercolor. I never did. And it was in that 20 Minutes from Everywhere show and sold. So I've never seen it again. And this is actually, this is the Niagara River, or sorry, the Buffalo River. This is a drawing that I did as a practice for Hall Walls twice annual drawing thing that they have where everybody you get 40 minutes to draw and then your piece is put up for sale. And I ended up using this image but it was the first time I did it and I wanted to practice first, and actually it turned out pretty good, I think. This is a piece that I did for that same 20 Minutes from Everywhere show. It's that wonderful sunflower farm out in Niagara County, done with watercolor and pen and ink. And this is a wonderful tool. It's a white gel pen that I learned about from a woman who I consider to be my sketching mentor, who lives outside of Manchester. Her name is Pat Southern Pierce. And I recommend if you want to learn about sketching, about what's possible, go to either her Facebook page. She has an Instagram page and also a website, but she's very active on Facebook. She's always posting. And she's very accessible and responds to questions and stuff. And she introduced me to all kinds of neat materials. This is the house down the street, Gordon Ballard and Brian Olinsky's wonderful garden. Every garden walk up until this year, which we didn't have one last year, I go into somebody's yard and do a drawing or a painting. So this is Gordon's, and this is over on Little Summer Street. That's really fun to do. People come and watch you, and I do it for the National Garden Festival, not the actual garden walk when all the gardens are open, but when the gardens are open on Thursday and Friday nights, and there's not so many people, and you can actually see anything that's in it and ask questions. It's a lovely time. This is my studio. I'm very, very, very fortunate. People ask me, wow, aren't you lucky to have designed that? And I did not design this. Tom designed this for his wife, Jeannie, who was the indoor plant columnist for the Buffalo News. She was a librarian in the Buffalo schools, and he was doing all kinds of renovations in the house, taking out floors and things. And she said, you can do all of that as long as you get me a greenhouse. So he took out one of the dormer windows and replaced everything with glass. This window, this is operable here. And Jeannie had all she did was she had plants up here. And then Tom had his area behind over on this part. When I moved in, we moved my studio into what had been Jeannie's greenhouse. And these are my there's 2 painting services. This is where I'm sitting right now. I'm looking at this screen, actually. It is the best space. I could not ask for a more wonderful place to be able to paint. The only problem was, because this is a southwest window, it got bloody hot. It's the 3rd floor. So when we put an elevator addition on the back of our house because we realized that we wanted to stay here rather than move into anything else. And it's a 2-family. We live on the 2nd and 3rd floor. We put an elevator addition on the back and at the same time air conditioned the 3rd floor. So I can now paint up here even when it's 90 degrees outside. I can get it to 75. But it is a wonderful space. Now, I've been experimenting a lot. This was done in, I think, 2013 or 14, no, maybe 15. It's actually looking at a sunset on Hurdle Avenue in Buffalo. And it's done on gesso, on watercolor paper that's had 2 coats of gesso on it, so that you don't have the control that you do with regular watercolor paper with Arches watercolor paper or any of the others. So you are automatically forced to be freer. The big challenge in something like this is stop. Don't do anything more on it. You're going to ruin it if you do anything more. So I took the advice of a couple of friends I was painting with, and I stopped. And that year it won the gold medal in the Buffalo Society of Artists annual catalog show, which was a huge, huge honor. I couldn't believe it because I'd been, I think I'd just gotten in the year before, and it was just huge. And it's also got into the national show, the Adirondack National. It's the kind of painting that I don't know if you guys have things that you never want to sell. This one is not for sale. It hangs in our living room as a reminder to me of what I can do when I'm free. This is also a watercolor that's gotten into a lot of shows and won awards. It's of the Buffalo, or the Niagara Canal, looking out towards the wastewater treatment plant in Buffalo. What I do for commissions and things, for spending money, is house portraits, just like my mother did. Mine are a little bit different because I tend to be more of a watercolor artist than she was. She was really an illustrator. But these are two houses that I did this past winter, both Buffalo houses, both friends. And I do enjoy it. It's a pen and ink drawing that I then add watercolor to. They're fun to do. I enjoy it. I also continue to do pen and ink and watercolor of buildings that people want me to do. This was the Gold Dome. I'm happy with this one. I love granulation. This comes from using cobalt blue watercolor paint, especially Daniel Smith. It has a wonderful, I'm sorry, it's not cobalt blue, it's ultramarine blue and cerulean blue. It granulates beautifully, it makes this lovely granulation texture that you cannot control. You could never paint that. It's the watercolor doing it for you. Skies are a big thing for me. This was a commission I did for a fellow who was unfortunately very ill. Wanted to always remember the sunset from his window. I do more than buildings and skies. The thing that challenges me most are trees. This is from a photograph of a bunch of trees in Delaware Park that I've done with all kinds of backgrounds. I think the biggest challenge for me, backing up a little bit, with buildings, I have nothing to learn. I can draw and paint a building without thinking about it, because I'm an architect. And I love trees, but I'm not patient enough to get their structure really, really accurately. I think when I did this painting, I was satisfied with the structure of it. This one, afraid I lost it and ended up just counting on color to save the painting. But it's all about patience and observation. I find that in this last year, when we've all been in isolation, that my walks with my golden retriever in the morning, I am so much more observant than I ever was when I was in a hurry all the time. But when you don't have anything to do, there's nothing calling you back except breakfast. You can observe. This is another thing that's challenging me these days, is painting on Yupo. And that's really something where the paper and the watercolor are what's in charge. You can have an idea of what you want to have it turn out as, but you really can't control it. This is looking out across Three Sisters Island towards Canada. This is another one that I did on UPO that's standing in the parking lot at 500 Seneca Street in the city at sunset. And all of this is all just the way the paint sits on the paper, and you have to let it dry. It doesn't sink in the way it does in regular watercolor paper. It's right on the surface. So you paint and you let it dry, and then you really can't go back in because everything comes up so easily. You just get it slightly damp and the paint lifts. So it's really in and done, and then you spray it to make sure that you don't lose any paint. But I love the effects that you get. It's very different from the pen and ink things that I do. Last April, one of the fun things at the very beginning of, actually the thing that got me started on sketching again, was a 30-day sketching drawing challenge that the artist Kathy George put together. It was so fun. She gave a prompt for every morning, and you painted or you did a sketch for that prompt. Like, for instance, this was what's out your window. This one was more shapes and perspective. This was some. The last one was do what you do well, and this was actually a sketch, a drawing of the Hooks, which is where Tom's family group came from in Buffalo. They're gone. It's gone now. It's Canal Side, but that's where a lot of the Italian immigrants lived. And this one's called Format. I'm not sure how I came to this for format. These are brushes, some of my wonderful brushes. Another just example of things. All right. So for the last year, I've never been a fan of news. I'm not a news hound at all. But for the last year, I became just enamored of Andrew Cuomo. I have to admit, I'm embarrassingly admitting. I watched every single one of his news conferences, and each one I did a sketch. Now these are all small. They're like the large size is probably 5 inches. And I only worked on them during when he was talking. So these are each like an hour and a half, maybe the most. But I did one for every day. Whatever he that he said that hit me is what the sketches were. Here's a whole bunch of them. This was day 9. Sorry, this one down here is day 95 of the actual pandemic and day 9 of, let's see, is it Black Lives Matter? I think so. Here's day 324. I mean, we were at it for a long time. Then there was the day that he used the Grinch as his symbol. That was a good day. But I found that I could really synthesize what I was hearing into something that was meaningful to me and to other people too. This one says, day 97 or day 12, colliding crises, time for relief, change awareness in society now. I became very, very, very vocal. What I did was I took 9 of these sketches and made a collage out of them, did some ink drawing around it, and entered it into a show and won 3rd place. And now it's going to be at the Castellani in a show that opens June 1st. It's a Buffalo Society of Artists, their catalog, 124th catalog show. So there's my attempt at Andrew Cuomo. And I don't know if you've ever, there was a period of time when they listed counties on one of the websites, and each one of them had a graph, a really skinny graph with what it was like. Like this is Erie County's graph that I enlarged, and this is where we didn't have any COVID, and then we were hit badly, and then we sort of calmed down again, and then we were okay, and then we got bad, and then we went, and then we. I find that to be fascinating. It's amazing what will fascinate you when you're isolated. This one, the comment here is reality wins every time, July 1st, 2020. I'm not sure what how I came up with that, but this one's from May. Reopening day 3, New York on pause. Big mistake. We reopened. Anyway. My Christmas card, I send a Christmas card out every year. That's an original. And one of my things that I do that's not art related, not drawing type or painting art related, is I sing. I'm an alto. I sing in the choir at Trinity Episcopal Church in Buffalo. And we haven't been able to sing together since last April. So I took a photograph of all that I had in my archives, and I brought it out and put a mask on everybody and painted it and sent this out as my Christmas card. And I'm not in it because I took the photograph, but what a year. What an amazing year it has been. We're actually going to meet in our first service in Trinity Episcopal Church is going to be the first Sunday in June. Half of the capacity can be met, which there's no way that we're going to meet that because we've never met half the capacity of the church. It's a huge church, so it's going to be nice to see people again. Seems like every other year, so I do a painting of something about the Frank Lloyd Wright House, Darwin Martin House. This is looking through a window in the house out to the through the, I guess they call it the gazebo, or I'm not sure, out to the bookstore or the gift shop. It's ink and watercolor. And this is Tom. He's got a great face. It's really easy to paint because he's got such strong features. And the light was coming in across our breakfast table, and what appear to be stripes here are actually from the blind. I entered this painting in a national show and won an award. I was very, very happy with that. And it's not for sale. And this is what I'm working on these days. Again, trees, they are a challenge for me. I really want to do a good job painting trees, but I also want to loosen up. So this is graphite and watercolor on Mylar. What fun is that? It was a total failure until I added the graphite, and then I came back in with watercolor again. If you look carefully, I think you can see the pencil lines here and here. Basically, it was already a very loose watercolor, and the pencil lines really relate to the watercolor, not to the actual reality of what's going on. Anyway, this one's going to be at the Castellani also. This is my last slide, and then I'll stop sharing the screen and we can talk a little bit. But this is what we don't actually have to stay home anymore. Both I heard from the CDC today said that if you didn't have to wear a mask when you're outside, and there were some small gatherings where you didn't have to. I'm still going to be very protective of myself and my husband and everybody that I love. Okay, so I don't have to be spotlit anymore. We can do a. Oh well, I'll take that back. I'm sitting in my actually sitting in my studio. You can see there's the greenhouse. It's just really, and my husband, one of his jobs in one of his professions was as an interior designer. One of the reasons that we liked each other so much right off the bat. And I believe as an artist, with an artist daughter and an artist mother and an artist grandmother, I always hung things salon style, where like this, with all the hundreds of as many things as I can get up as possible. And Tom, on the other hand, as an interior designer, was more inclined to put one painting perfectly picked out for color to go over the couch that was also perfectly picked out for a painting. And on that same wall where he had one painting, I'd have 10. So then we moved in together, and it became clear that I had to. You can see this other wall here too. Look at that one. It has the one that looks like a Rorschach test is one of my daughter's paintings. Cindy Gash is my daughter. She's a cool lady. So we had to basically sit each other down and say, okay, you've got this wall. You can have this room. You've got the stairwells. But in the living room and the dining room. So I took him at his word, and I have paintings everywhere that I'm allowed to have paintings.
I bet you took the stairwell.
Yeah, paintings from the bottom of the wall cabinets in our kitchen to the countertop. Paintings. And it's fine. It works just fine. My laundry room is like an art gallery, and it's like 5 by 8. So anyway, does anybody have any questions? Or I think most people are muted. You can unmute yourself if you have a question.
I think Jack asked if you're any relation to Bob Syracuse.
No, I don't think so, Jack. Joe had a sister named Marie and a bunch of cousins, but none of them were Bob.
Well, there was Bob and Dan, and they owned the pizza plant.
Yeah, I don't think there's so many Syracuses. They're probably related, but not in the immediate family that I had known. Great guy, though. What a wonderful man. Now I'm not a Buffalonian. I'm actually from Rochester, New York. I did all my high school and grade school and stuff there. Then went out to college in Massachusetts and stayed out in Massachusetts until 1970. Then to New Jersey, then to Fredonia, following around the father of my kids, as we do. And then I got a divorce. By that time, I had to have my architecture firm was in Fredonia, which was an odd place for an architecture firm. There's not a lot of call for a lot of architects in Fredonia, New York, but I ended up got some really wonderful breaks. I did some work on a whole bunch of townhouses in Ellicottville for a developer, 2 guys who were also elected to their school boards, one to Salamanca and one to Ellicottville. They convinced their school boards that they should hire me. I had no experience doing schools. Learned fast.
Yeah.
Became an expert in a matter of a year so that I could actually do the work. And then it just mushroomed from that. I was very fortunate.
Absolutely. Trial by fire.
I'm really glad to not be an architect. I like to say that nobody gets a broken leg from a bad painting. The cost of my professional liability insurance was more than most people make. Just awful.
Wow.
But fortunately, I don't have to do that anymore. So I'm going to lighten my image here. There.
So I have a question about your sketches and watercolors that you do when you're on vacation.
Pardon me?
I have a question about the sketches and paintings that you do when you're taking trips.
There's a big echo. Have you got more than one device on wherever you are? If you have more than one device on it, whatever will echo. Maybe everybody should mute themselves except the person who's asking the question. Let's see if that works. Who asked the question?
Sorry, I was actually muted. This is Stacy. I was asking about can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. The sketches and the paintings that you do when you're on vacation versus I think, average person who's taking photographs, how do you think, does it give you a different sense of things, like, after the trip is over, or a certain feeling that's different from a photograph, or how can you talk about that?
Sure I can, because there's a definite answer for that. Sort of the first thing I find out is that I remember and look and observe more closely what I'm actually sketching. I remember it forever. I wouldn't have to look back at the sketchbook in order to be able to remember it. I had an example which I used, which I cut out of this PowerPoint of the first day that we were in Buenos Aires. And we went out and I sat myself on a bench in the square, and behind a lot of trees and bushes, there was the French consulate. Wonderful building with a nice dome and everything. And I sketched it. And I also took a photograph. Well, the sketch has a lot of information in it. The photograph is just a bunch of trees. So as a result of sketching that, I remembered it forever. I take a lot of photographs when I travel also, but the things that I remember are the things that I've sketched, the things that I remember best. And I find that, I don't know if you find this, but I don't use a camera anymore. I have an iPhone, and I take hundreds of photographs. So it's really dangerous. I have hundreds of photographs that are on my computer. I sync it every day. And a lot of times I don't even look at what I'm photographing. I know that it's an image I like, so I take a picture of it rather than standing there and looking at it, or even better, sitting and sketching it. So I think my travels are enhanced by my habit of doing a sketchbook. Definitely enhanced. I love it. I love just the way the day has worked out. I'm collecting things from the restaurants and whatever, doing a sketch, come back to the hotel or the apartment that we're living in, write down what the day has been like on the pages near the sketch, make the collage of the things that I've collected, and then go to bed. And sometimes it's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, but it's been a wonderful day. It's all part of instead of watching television it's a nice way to travel. I enjoy it. Thanks for the question.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
First, a comment. I am so impressed by your work, your background. You blew me away. Everything that you've done is just beautiful. So my question is, when you do watercolor and pen and ink, what do you do first? Do you watercolor first and then add the pen and ink, or vice versa?
My normal approach is to do the pen and ink first. When I'm trying to save a bad painting, the ink comes afterwards. And I actually have an example of one right here. I think you'll be able to see this. This is a really bad floral. Really, really bad. It was a watercolor. It was, really bad.
What can you tell us why you think it's bad?
Well, now it's not bad anymore.
Okay.
Oh, let's see. Is Andrea still here? No, she's in the same watercolor class I'm in. Sally's trainer's been having us do flowers. This is, I can't even from looking at this tell you what flower it is. It was so far off. Oh, it's a tulip. They're tulips. It was really a non-success total, and I was just going to tear it up. And then I decided, well, why don't you go in there and look for all the changes in color and stuff, and outline them in ink, and then come back with this wonderful thing that I learned about from that woman Pat Southern Pierce that I told you about. This is a Pitt Artist pen brush by Faber-Castell. All the light, there was color behind all this stuff, and all the light is where I went over it with this pen brush. And it's turned out, it's fine, you know? I don't have to throw it away anymore. I actually posted it on Instagram and on Facebook, and people have wondered what size. The question is, what size is that? Is always a good first question, because that means that maybe they're interested. And
Now, do you sell your originals in prints? I know you said there was a few that weren't for sale, but
yeah, everything is for sale except a very few. Like the one of Tom that I did is not, and the one when I won a first prize, it's hard to sell those, because they generally, when in the shows that I enter, when you get a first prize, it's because it's a good painting.
yes.
It's not because of some other reason.
Yeah.
And I often learn from what the response to something has been from everybody, not just the juror, but from the people looking at it and talking to me about it and stuff. But everything else is for sale. It's just that I am not a marketer. I don't have that as a gene.
Well, if someone were interested, how would they find out more?
All they need to do is just make a comment on my Facebook or Instagram, and I'll suggest that we get into a message back and forth and discuss
Okay.
it. I've sold quite a lot in the last year that way, actually. That surprised me.
Wow.
What are your favorite watercolor paints to use?
I love Daniel Smith.
Okay.
I was brought up, Sally Trainer brought me up with Winsor Newton.
Okay.
But I'm interested in Daniel Smith because they sort of go out in left field a little bit, and I like those. I still keep the basic triads that Sally teaches, you know, a warm triad and a cool triad, and more often than not, I'm just painting with the triad plus one or two. I'm not one to use 20 different colors in a painting. I don't have any greens. I always mix green and I mix orange. So that holds a watercolor together if you're using just a limited. But Daniel Smiths are very beautiful, especially the ones that are so expensive, which are actually made from stones and minerals and stuff. They're just
I just started purchasing the Daniel Smith ones.
Yeah, that starts with genuine. I have one genuine something. Here's this one. This is called, it's called Hematite Genuine.
Mhm.
And one of my favorite watercolor painters, living, not 90, watercolor painters right now is Sarah Yeoman, and she's from Delaware, but she also teaches. She mostly teaches up in the Adirondacks in the summertime. And she did a painting with just Hematite Genuine, and it was just so stunning that I had to go out and buy Hematite Genuine. And this little tiny tube is $12.
Yep.
So
a little bit expensive.
Yeah, but I think no, I haven't bought any clothes in a year. There was a funny thing on Facebook the other day, which one of my young architect friends, woman architect who's still practicing and are very definitely, she's very successful these days. there was a whole series of things that we all used to do back before COVID, and about eye makeup and shaving your legs. No offense, Jack. And wearing high heels and how many scarves. If you have 25 scarves and you get all these points. And I got 0. I wasn't doing any of those things. The only thing that I might have lied a little bit is I didn't count my scarves. I may very well have 20 scarves, but I don't wear 20 scarves. I wear 1 scarf. But life has changed. More observant, not spending money on stupid stuff, just art supplies.
Yeah. Oh, I can see that. Yeah.
And also eating, not to live, but living to eat. And not being really unhappy with myself about it. Just sort of saying, that's it, guys. This is life. I walk 3 to 4 miles every day. I can eat ice cream.
Exactly. Do you teach?
I do a couple of things a year at the Birchfield Penny, but I am absolutely not a teacher. I'm a bad teacher. I have very little, I'm probably okay, but it's just not my, I did a lot of mentoring especially when I was at Canon. In fact, I traveled all to their offices all across the country and did mentoring seminars. Because I'm a huge supporter of young architects, especially young women architects. And I believe especially women and men who are doing the role of the woman in their household, of picking up the kids at daycare and stuff, are underappreciated and underpaid. So I spent a lot of time at Canon arguing with the powers that be, the old boys network, to get them to appreciate the women who were working for them. And I think things improved, but when I retired, they went back to what they had been. Very unhappy. But all those wonderful women who I guess I was teaching are out doing fabulous things. One of them is Director of Development and Planning at UB. 3 of them have their own offices with employees and are doing incredibly well. So one of them is the architect for the Diocese of Buffalo, the Roman Catholic Diocese of Buffalo.
Wow.
I mean, just really people who hadn't been appreciated, who I guess got feeling good about themselves because of their relationship with a few other women in the firm. And people ask me, did you have a mentor when you were doing architecture? And the answer is no.
Oh.
I went to Harvard Graduate School of Design. There were no women faculty. There were 2 people in a class, 2 women in a class of 25. I did a year at Princeton, no women faculty. I was the first woman who graduated from the architecture school in Princeton. There were no women.
Wow.
My first mentor was Joe Syracuse, Yvonne.
Yeah, Yvonne's an architect.
Really cool.
Well, I can't say that I'm an architect because I'm not practicing, but I have.
You have a degree.
Do you have a license, Yvonne?
No.
Okay.
I have master's in architecture, but I quit work to stay home with my kids and raise them.
I would love to have done that, but unfortunately I was the only person there with an income. Didn't have a husband at the time. So, but Joe Syracuse was my mentor. He really taught me how to be a professional architect. I could do architecture, but I had no idea how to do clients or how to do staff at all. And I mean, I was pretty young when I think I was 42 when we got married. He was 51. He had a lot of experience and highly thought of, respected professional, and taught me tremendously. But until him, I was just seat of the pants stuff. And I have to say, I have to admit to being a human resources disaster with my own staff. It was just through luck and time that they hung in there with me, and we made relationships that worked. But no, I don't teach. But Sally Trainer's a great teacher, and there are a bunch of really good teachers. Jennifer Curry is and you have one of my favorite people, Kateri Ewing, is a wonderful teacher. And maybe I could just now, since it's actually been it's been published on Grace Mindbone's page. I'm Kateri and Jennifer Curry and I and can't remember the other woman's name, are going to be doing a watercolor show at Mindbone next spring.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Wonderful.
The fourth person, and I'm embarrassed that I don't remember her name, is, I had to look her up. She's a tattoo artist. Oh my God.
Oh,
Cool.
I think it's so neat. I'm gonna, by that time I'll be 79, going on 80, and I'll be going on 80, and she's probably 25 or something. It'll be really interesting to the contrast. But I looked at her work, and she does beautiful botanical tattoos. So,
well,
and she does a lot of wonderful watercolor paintings in order to get to the tattoo design. Just a different, you can never stop learning.
right. Oh, yeah. Totally agree.
Two of the watercolor artists in town, in the region, who I most respect, one of them, unfortunately, Noreen Sperling, died this past spring. She was 92 or 91. And Todd Chalk, another woman, is very proud of the fact that she's a week older than Noreen. So she was 90. She's also 92. And those two women, of all the artists that I've met, watercolor artists that I've met through the Niagara Frontier Watercolor Society, were the most challenging of themselves. They were always trying new things. And always there, like every time there was a show and they submitted something, it was, oh, I love this direction. And especially Noreen, she just blew me away. It's a shame that she was at Canterbury Woods. Just a wonderful artist. And Todd is still active and really doing gorgeous things, just incredible. Primarily abstractions at this point. Just, you don't, when you look at him, there's no way that somebody's 92 is painting these things. She's great. So I hope I can do that. I see there's some, I can put, why don't I type my address in right here? Cheryl?
Yeah, thank you. I was going to ask you after on an email, but Stacy also had a question that's, what advice would you give someone who hasn't painted and wants to start? How would you tell them to begin?
Well, I would say get yourself a really good teacher. No, really. Like
Yeah.
somebody like Sally Trainer does a Zoom watercolor class. Right now it's on Monday mornings, 2 hours every Monday morning. And she has people of all levels in that class beginning, and she's willing to spend time with you on them. I mean, now that we can actually be in people's houses and stuff, I'm sure that she would be willing to spend time with a brand new painter in person to start to learn. But if you go to the Niagara Frontier Watercolor Society website, which I am the master of, you will see a list of watercolor painters who are members of the Watercolor Society who teach classes. Like there's a woman named Deanna Weinholz who does it through the botanical gardens. Jody Zine does it through Partners in Art out in North Tonawanda. North Tonawanda is becoming a real art center.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
painter, what it's Partners in Art, and what else? What are the other?
River in the pencil. River
Yeah,
in the
pencil
river.
in the river. Yeah.
Yes.
Great. But I think it's hard to just buy what you need and then start to try to do it yourself. Quite honestly, it's I think it's best to get somebody to help you, especially like there are people who come into Sally's class who've been using a particular kind of watercolor and find out that it's actually student grade. And there's a huge difference between student grade watercolor and professional watercolor in a tube. Just a huge difference in what you get in terms of color and value and luminosity. And the paper makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
The weight of the paper and the
What have you found to be your I don't know, your favorite paper to use?
I'm
for
still
PDF?
I'm still stuck with Arch's 140-pound cold press.
Okay.
I've tried all kinds of different ones, and I find some of them too soft. When Ian Stewart is a watercolor painter from Alabama who came and did a workshop here, the last live workshop that we had before COVID hit, and he was using an English watercolor paper that I've bought a few sheets of, and I'm so not thrilled with it that I can't remember the name anymore. I still got the sheets, and I'm going to have to use them because they're expensive. But every once in a while, some new manufacturer comes up with one. Fabriano is good, but very, very soft.
Yeah.
So you don't have as much. If you have to, you can unlike what most people think, you can still remove watercolor from a painting, but only if you've got a really good paper.
Yes.
And with Fabriano, it's so soft that you really don't have that capability. It ruins the paper very quickly when you're trying to get some. So Arches is sturdy. I think it's fun. I like using Arches. I also like rice paper. Rice paper is really cool, but it's a different animal altogether.
Right.
And if you are going to try rice paper, one word of recommendation: put a piece of wax paper down underneath it.
Oh,
Or
I never heard that.
all the watercolor will go right through to whatever board you got it on.
Oh, that's true. Yes. Okay.
So, and UPO is really for the next level. It's like I'd say get yourself comfortable and happy with what you're doing on regular watercolor paper first. And I'm not a fan of a block of paper. I really like individual sheets. And I don't wet them. I mean, I don't stretch them or anything. I do put tape down around it because I like the looks. Like with this one, you can see they actually went underneath the tape. But I like when it works, that doesn't go underneath the tape. And you have a nice clean white line around. And if you want to, you can float when you're framing something. You can float so the mat comes to here.
Okay. Yeah.
And then you see the dappled edge is really nice. So yeah, I'm a fan of Arches, and I was all ready to go to somebody different because when Arches changed hands, there was a big rumor that they weren't doing the sizing as well, and it wasn't consistent, and people were complaining. But I think enough really fine artists were going to a different paper that Arches got their act together, and now it's back to being okay. One of my here's something for everybody to think about, and that is, this is snarky, Carol. Somebody said, I think it must have been Sarah Yeoman, why do they call us watercolorists when people aren't called oil paintingists or acrylicists or pastelists?
True.
We are artists painting in watercolor. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. Yeah.
I still see
Carol.
it in paper and stuff though. not in art magazines. They've dropped watercolor, but it still shows up every once in a while. Did you have a question, Jack?
Where's your next big adventure when you can travel?
Well, it's all set. We're gonna go back. We were able to get our money that we put down on the place that we like to rent in Key West. Moved it to February of 2022.
Nice.
Yeah, Key West is so relaxing to me. You know, one of the things that as much as I love my golden retriever, and I like getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and going out and watching the sunrise and all the whole bit. I love not having to do that for 2 weeks.
So somebody else takes care of Betsy, huh?
Well, Bessie goes to the spa.
Oh, Betsy goes to the spa.
Out to Hamburg to a place called Hound Away from Home. This woman raises border collies. She's a young woman, her husband and a little boy. They have 12 dogs of their own, and they take on a limit like 5 dogs that come to live in their house just like the rest of the dogs. And
That's nice.
Bessie's their favorite. They have a full 1 acre fenced field for them all to run in, and they do have coyotes, so it's a very high fence. So she goes there. She loves it. She comes back sylph-like. It's a good thing. So I'm looking forward to next February, and then if we're lucky, if England can get their act together, we're gonna go chase my relations way back. We've on ancestry.com. We've gone back in England back to 1500s, and in Ireland back to the 1400s. So.
Oh, okay. Where in Ireland?
We just discovered that, so I haven't memorized that one yet. But the English part is in 2 different parts of England. We go to London first for a week, and then go to one town, and then go to the other town.
Yeah.
They're not there anymore, but I don't really care about meeting the people. I just want to see what it's like.
Yeah.
Let's see. Is the Redeveloping Buffalo available? This is from Jack, right? Which one is the Redeveloping Buffalo? Yep. Which one is that?
It was probably in your PowerPoint. I don't know, 2 or 3 in. It was like the Silo City shot.
Yeah, it's available as a G-Clay reproduction. Sure.
How much is it?
The original is long gone. I don't know who owns that.
Well, the print. I mean, I was really intrigued by that.
Well, you're welcome to drop me a line. Let me put in the chat. Let me put my telephone number too. I'm happy with either text or telephone. My daughter won't talk on the phone much anymore. I find that interesting. Young people are. How about you, Cheryl?
Well, see, I can't text either.
There we go. But I do text. I find that's a good way to get started, and then we can always talk.
Have you ever done OLV, Our Lady of Victory?
No,
Basilica?
I haven't. No, I haven't. But I'm happy to get suggestions. I need to go back to the Darwin Martin House and do one that isn't quite so rigid. But that's a tough building. As a lover of Frank Lloyd Wright, it's hard for me not to get rigid. Let's see. I hope I haven't discouraged Stacy about wanting to start. You know, I don't know where you live, but if you live in East Aurora, then I recommend Katira Ewing. Not only as a teacher, she's full of knowledge and she is such a sharing, wonderful, gentle person. I just think she's a terrific teacher. Well, I think we're set.
Thank you so much, Carol. And Stacy did say you didn't discourage her at
Oh,
all.
good,
She put that in the chat.
That's good. Did everybody get my address and telephone number? I think you did.
Yes.
I will unspotlight myself so that we can see everybody here. Most everybody's just relaxing with no photograph. Actually, I'm pretty good looking in the one that's not a video too. See?
Oh, very
I
nice.
like it.
I like that.
That's one of my daughter's painting behind me.
Oh,
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say no to this initially. My first
Wow.
reaction, but I'm glad I didn't.
We thank you very much.
Yeah,
I
glad to
really
meet all of you
appreciate
guys, and I hope that we can connect, and make sure you keep your eye out for Mindbomb's
yes.
scheduling and
I'm gonna go.
stop in, because it should be a great show. You'll see Kateri and this Jennifer Corey lives in East Aurora too. She's young. She's your age, Cheryl. I mean, she's a child.
it. I wouldn't say I'm that young.
Well, she's got young children, and she was
Okay.
an illustrator, and then gave up as a paid illustrator and decided to become a full-time painter. And she does some acrylics, but mostly she does watercolors, and they're really beautiful. They're just
And what was the name for her?
Jennifer Coury, Koury.
Okay.
And she's the one who teaches at the Birchfield Penny. And now those are going to be live classes. So I think for Stacy, that might be a way to begin. She usually has a equipment list, which is not too demanding. And then you can go there and see whether you like it or not. She has quite a following of people who think she's terrific. So you're not making a big commitment. I think it's like $30 or something.
Wow.
If you're a member.
Okay.
But even if you're not a member, it's not a lot of money. Okay, well, I think I'm very pleased to meet everybody. And
It was a real pleasure.
yeah, I look forward to seeing you all at Mindbomb in 2022.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to unhost myself. Or you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you very much.
I guess I'm the one who's going to close the meeting since I'm the host. Cheryl.
Sounds good.
All right, bye everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.